Welcome to My Body, My Bump, My Baby, where we help women be empowered, intentional mothers. This podcast is best enjoyed sipping tea or taking a stroll in nature. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be substituted for professional psychological or medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, midwife, or other qualified health provider with any questions about your personal situation, health, or medical condition. Welcome back. Last episode, we talked to Meg, and she told us about her hospital birth story with Bryn. And today, we are going to rejoin that conversation, wrap things up with Bryn's story, and start a new story that took place in a independent, freestanding birth center, and hear about her birth story with Cora. Now, you did a lot of prep, so you took classes, but getting information, it's not just that. Like, you can get information out of a book, right? But it's more than getting information. It's actually like starting to envision, and I think you kind of mentioned it throughout, like you kind of bounced back and forth about what you were envisioning versus what was happening, and what you were envisioning versus what was happening. Part of your work and your journey was creating this vision for yourself of, what can this look like? What do I want it to look like? What do I think I can do? Where do I feel safe? Like, all of those things were part of your process. And then the information was just there to help you kind of build that image for yourself, right?
Yeah. And I thought through, okay, what do I need to, how do I need to mentally prepare if I am given the fork in the road that a C-section is the only option? Those are the types of things to really think about if you do want to go the natural, unmedicated hospital birth route. If that's what I want, that's what I wanted for my first. But I knew that things can happen. And so rather than being sitting with disappointment and feeling devastated by like another fork in the road or something, I spent a lot of time envisioning the birth that I wanted and manifesting that in hopes that would happen, but also still having the conversations like, what do we do if this happens? What do we do if that happens?
I love that. So not hiding from the fact that there are alternate routes that this labor can take. I run into a lot of women who are like, I don't want to talk about that because I don't want that. But in some respects, I understand that, because they're like, I don't want to wrap my brain around that and get stuck there and start manifesting that thing. I understand that. But on the other hand, you don't want to be ill-prepared and move yourself into a place of trauma because you didn't research and understand what that path would look like. And so you're saying, you looked at all the paths, you knew how to get through all the paths or how you would navigate all of them, but you wanted to focus on this one. So had all the information, but I just want to focus on, this is how I really want it to go.
Yeah. And I did a lot of practicing with my husband, how to stand during labor, or, conversations that he's more of an introverted, person, in a hospital setting. He also does not like blood in any way. So that was a little bit of fear of the unknown of like, okay, am I gonna pass out, or am I gonna be fine? Am I gonna be running on adrenaline? Kind of in the same way. And he was fine.
Good.
He was given a lot of the tools in that class, and I can't stress that enough. Like, if you're able to have your birth partner be a part of your classes or your conversation, that can make it so much easier in the process because you know you can let go a little bit of the other stuff when you're in the labor land, and you know that they can step in and be like, okay, this is what I know she wanted, or this is what I know that we need to do next.
I love that. Well, I mean, labor is pretty big on its own, and the idea of having to navigate labor and also manage everything around you, that just sounds like way too much and overwhelming. So I do love the idea of feeling confident enough with your partner or your support team in giving them everything else. Like, I'm just going to focus on the labor, and I feel safe and confident that they understand me and know what I want, and they're going to take care of everything else. You can just let go of that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. I was so lucky to be able, I feel very, very grateful to be able to talk about my birth story in such a positive way and be able to look back on it. And it wasn't what I had envisioned. Like when I wrote out my original, like, what would your ideal birth story look like? And my birth plan and everything got kind of turned upside down when I had to start and end in the hospital. But it was perfect. And it was exactly what I wanted to, I just wanted to be in charge of my own body. And I think that's what I really realized through those classes and through my preparation. I knew that I didn't want to find myself making choices or making decisions that like were kind of influenced by the hospital when I knew that I could stand firm on certain things because I was educated on them. And I think that that's sometimes somewhat surprising in a hospital setting, is when people are like, wait a minute, you know why, baby, for those maybe out there, I might throw a little wrench in there, but like, you know why you don't need erythromycin for your baby with their eyes when they're born. But that's just so procedural for them.
Right.
And then it throws them off because they're like, oh, wait. Like, this mama doesn't want like the erythro, and then they're completely thrown off. And they're like, wait, are you sure? And you're like, no, I'm sure. I know why babies get this, and I know that they're like, our baby isn't in danger, and so we don't want that. And that's just a personal decision that we've made. Like, we don't want that for our baby when they come into this world.
I love it. And you're totally allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And that's totally okay.
Yeah. And it's kind of like any mama, like what we talk about with all the mamas, like if you want a medicated hospital birth, then learn how to be empowered in your medicated hospital birth, right?
Yes.
And you can still be empowered in whatever choice you make.
Yes.
And that has to be okay. Whatever choice and whatever route you want to take. I don't think we support women enough in the secret menu item options. I wish that was more of the conversation that we had with mamas, of saying like, hey, did you know this? Did you know that? And it's amazing how many are like, I had no idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's awesome.
Exactly. Well, and, we hear a lot of second-time mamas telling their first birth story, and a lot of things happening to them, and they're hearing for the very first time, like, well, you didn't need to do that, or that probably wasn't necessary. And they're like, what? Yeah. What? And, it is... In some respects, it's unfortunate that you need to do all that homework before you go into the labor. But on the other hand, I think it's our responsibility as well. I think, if you're going to hand over your control over your body and your decisions and your autonomy and your life and your baby's life to somebody, well, then you're going to get what they think is best for you, and they don't know you.
Yeah.
Or you could take that control back and do your homework and figure out what is best for you and your family, and then let them know, which is quite refreshing, I'm sure, at some points for these people.
Yeah.
I think we have to remember that this is their job.
Yeah.
They literally go to work and they do this every day, just like we have our jobs that we do 9 to 5, right? They have their 8-hour work day and they're doing the same thing every day, in and out, in and out. And so it is really easy and fair to expect that they get in a routine and it's somewhat robotic. And that's okay. And that's human. And so I would say, yeah, kind of a bummer, but it totally is our responsibility to know what we want. It's like going to buy a car, Right? Would you go to buy a car and you walk into like the car lot and just be like, I'm here for a car? And then just take whatever they hand you, and then they're like, okay, your bill is, $30,000. Okay. And then you walk out and you're like, this car doesn't make any sense for my family. I have 3 kids and this is a 2-door car. I live in the mountains and this has 2-wheel drive. Like, what the heck is this, right? Well, how were they ever supposed to know unless you did your homework and went in there and said, hey, I need a vehicle. These are the specs that I want. This is what I want to drive off the lot with, right? I mean, that's a very simplified example, but really,
it's a great example.
Yeah,
it's such a good example because I also don't think that enough mamas share their positive stories with each other. They're like, we're the society of like the thrill fact of like, oh, like that happened to you, and rather than being like, oh, I had this great birth, they're like, what? Like,
almost like it's taboo to have a good birth story.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like that.
Right, and you kind of go into it, and they're like, didn't anything traumatizing or something like that? Of like, no. It was just empowering, and it was intense, but it was never painful. And that's the word that I don't know. I think I throw people off a lot of times because they ask, was it painful? Was it, all the things that you think about with natural. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you had a natural birth. I'm like, it was never painful. It was uncomfortable. I was never like, oh yeah, this is comfy. Like, no, it's labor, but
it's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard.
But it's not, I don't know. If you orient your mind, and this time around, I actually read some hypnobirthing techniques. I think last time I was so bombarded with the new of the everything, that this time I thought, okay, what could I throw in this time that maybe I could use as a new technique that I had done before?
You had a toolbox already established that worked for you, and you're like, hey, let me get some additional tools for this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was able to say, this is what I had in my birth the first time around. Maybe this is what I want to see the second time around. And I'm really grateful, again, to be able to sit here and say I didn't have anything that was really traumatizing. So I wasn't fearful of the second time, or of like, okay, well, that happened the first time. Could this happen the second time? And I learned so much in the second, in pregnancy, it doesn't matter if you're group beta strep positive in your first pregnancy. You can be group beta strep negative or positive in your second.
Absolutely.
Things like that you have to kind of learn and start to navigate again. And in this case, I knew that I wanted to, from what I had read, I knew that I wanted to have my baby in the tub. I remember feeling the best in the tub in the hospital, and that was when I had to get out.
The tub is a game changer. I love it. It's a fantastic tool for an unmedicated labor.
Yeah. And this time around, I was, with being a second-time mom, I almost missed the tub because I chose to have a birth at the birth center.
So things went fast second time around.
Fast. Really fast. I had her on Super Bowl Sunday, and I tell people I started contractions in the first quarter, and I had her before the end of the fourth quarter.
Oh my God!
So that gives people perspective, right? Everybody at their party, they're like, "Whoa!" Like,
yes.
I was sitting there eating apple slices in the first quarter, like, "Oh yeah, this is starting." Like, I had just taken a shower, texted the birth center. I think things are happening. Next thing I know. And I'm going into active labor, and this time around, because it happened so fast, I was conversational the whole time. Oh. And that threw my husband off.
You were expecting, like, oh, it's going to, like, this is the easy part. It's going to get harder.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And my husband was waiting. He's like, where's the labor land? Where's the labor land? I said, when I go nonverbal, that's when
it's time to go.
Yes. And I never did. And I kept talking through and being, and them being like, how you feeling? I'm like, whew, they're really intense. Like, they're really intense. And I remember thinking, like, but I have enough energy, and I'm able to kind of like, I'm not feeling great to chit-chat. I'm not like in a chit-chat place, but I was able to talk or respond, and I was still present.
I love it.
And then my water broke at home.
Uh-oh.
And that was the indication for both my husband and my doula, because last time I was 9 centimeters.
Yes.
And she looks at my husband and says, get the car, we got to go now.
Yes.
because, kind of history repeats itself a little bit. Like they were like, hey, your water broke really late last time. It probably is breaking late again.
And we don't have that much time because this baby's coming out here soon.
So
Let me clarify real quick.
Yeah.
So this time, this is the second birth. This time you are not going to a hospital. When you're saying birth center, I want to clarify, it's actually an independent standing birth center, only run with midwives. It doesn't have like an OR. Right? It doesn't have all of the nurses for labor and delivery. I just want to clarify because a lot of people hear birth center and there's a lot of hospitals marketing their labor and delivery as birth centers, but that is not the same as what you actually chose for the second birth, right?
Right. Yep. So, exactly what you're describing.
So they actually have no access to epidural. That's not something that they can provide. They don't do surgeries. They don't do anything like that. It's a place where the intention is to be cared for by certified nurse midwives, and the idea is that you would have, for the most part, an unmedicated birth.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was what I knew because I felt so safe the first time in the space and in that option of non-medicated. I thought this is like an option for me. I felt like this was something that I knew would be a possibility and I would feel safe again. Because there are still, without jumping around too much, like they let you opt in for Pitocin when after you've had baby to help with contracting the uterus, which I'll mention maybe later, but that actually ended up saving my life because I was just shy of hemorrhaging. Ooh. And at 1.5 liters. I was at 1,100 milliliters, which at 1.5 liters, they actually
you need a transfusion.
And
mm-hmm.
so they transfer you to the hospital, mm-hmm. which that's, one piece of it that you have to be informed about. Like if you're going to go to a freestanding birth center and this happens to you, you may have to be transported to the hospital if something like this. That they're going to put you in a position where they're going to save your baby's lives,
right?
And they're going to do everything right, but they're also going to be able to do everything right in the moment and give you the medication that you might need afterwards with birthing the placenta. So that was the piece of my birth that maybe was a little bit more on the scary side, but they never made me feel like I was scared. Like I was always informed, but it was, hey, we're okay. We're in a good place. This is working. Okay, this is also working. We're like nearing the 1 liter of blood loss, but we're okay. And, just kind of having the conversation and the calmness was what was key for me.
I love it.
Yeah.
So rewind. I cut you off.
No, you're good.
So you are still at home. Your bag of water ruptured. Super Bowl is on in the background. And then they're like, hey, we got to go because we don't have that much time, we think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And so I remember thinking, okay, I got to walk to the car. And I thought, yeah, okay. And I was very present. I mean, this was in the span of, so this was now about 6:30 at night. I started at like 4:30, right, when Super Bowl started. So I was only 2 hours in. I have a lot of energy. I'm fine. So at that time, I walked to the car, and I remember having a massive contraction outside of the car, but it felt amazing because it was cooler that night here in where we live. And I was able to I was hot, and I had this massive contraction outside. My doula held onto me. I held over her shoulders, and I just was like, riding this wave and thinking, okay, I can't get into the car until this is over. But this fresh air feels so good as well. I just will never forget the feeling of that cold air and thinking I'm going to wear this freezing cold outfit because it feels so good. And we get in the car, and it's 17 minutes from my house to the birth center if you drive at a normal speed limit and you don't hit any lights. And we hit every light.
Oh, shoot.
And my husband had to go 90 on the highway because we live in, the downtown area, and this is up north area. So you have to go on a highway. where we live. And so we're in the car, and the contractions are really intense. And that was the piece that I never got to practice or experience, is that
laboring in the car.
Laboring in the car.
Yes, that's a big deal.
And I was really nervous about that. And I remember right before my water broke this second time around, before it was even a choice, my doula looked at me and said, I want to know what you're feeling right now. Like, are you feeling like you want to leave? And I'm like, I'm really nervous about the car ride. And this was right before my water broke. I was like, I'm just feeling like the car ride's going to be hard. Mm-hmm. And the car ride was hard. And then we get off at the exit of the car ride, and I started to push.
Uh-oh.
And I was like, it was so intense. I was like, I don't even know, like, what I'm supposed to do right now.
So I feel like from the exit of the freeway to the birth center is still like 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Like regular driving time.
Yeah.
Holy cow. So you started pushing then? I
started pushing. Doula got on the line with the midwife at the birth center and said, like, hey, you got to get outside. You got to be ready for this, mama. She's coming in, and she's coming in hot. Like, and so they started having me actually do like a reversal breath that I had never practiced before. It was like, rather than like the deep, low put, it was like, you got to do like panty, like the kind of the ones that you hear in the movies.
We call it like blow out the birthday candles.
Yeah, like suck the baby back
up. Please.
Yeah. So the doula was like, oh my gosh, are we going to have this baby in the car? So we hear this ambulance, and my husband thought that the ambulance was coming for us for something, because he was so, I was like, I'm pushing, and he's like, no, like, you can't have this baby in the car. He was just so thrown off by it, because he was like, what do I do? And we finally get in there, and the birth center is actually right near, independently of an ER, like an ER area where there are ambulances. So he heard the ambulance and thought it was for us, and he was like, am I supposed to stop? And she's like, no,
that's not for you.
Yeah. So we hear this ambulance, it throws him off. So we get in there, and we drive in. We get to the birth center. At the end of a contraction, I get like thrown into the wheelchair. I get shuttled through the hallway. Can't remember any of that really. The first time I actually got to experience it was through my birth photographer's video. I couldn't remember it visually, and I got to see it from that perspective. I
love that.
It was wild, because my brain reoriented a new birth story almost. Oh. Got in the room. And this was at 7:02, and I had her at 7:28.
Oh, my goodness.
I had 3 contractions.
You made it.
I made it.
You made it, so no car baby.
No car baby.
And you had that baby in about 3 hours, is that right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel hard or overwhelming?
No, not at all. It was amazing this time around, because I labored, and I thought, okay, I'm not exhausted.
Yeah.
And that was, it was hard. Similar thing. And the hemorrhaging, like the just shy of hemorrhaging 1.5 liters was hard on my body.
Of course.
But I had my birth team there, and I felt safe, and I was taken care of, and everything was fine.
Now, on Bryn's birth story, the very first birth story that you shared with us, you had mentioned after you pushed your baby out, there was a disconnect, and one of the things you wish you were able to do on the next labor was to birth your own baby, to touch your baby and bring your baby to your chest as you're pushing the baby out. Were you able to do that?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It makes me tear up just thinking about it. I could, because I was in the tub, I was able to make that connection when I was crowning with her head. And as a mama, like some mamas might actually feel really squeamish about that, but what I really learned through that process, and what you taught me too, was that you make sense of this out-of-body experience of labor when you're touching that baby.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, I'm welcoming you. You're coming. And so it was so fast, because I remember, I felt the top of her head, And I thought, okay, it'll be like the same thing. Like, I'll have to maybe struggle through. And the next thing I know, I'm like, there's her head. And like her head's out of the tub. And I'm like, I didn't even feel like it was, I mean, it was
right
hard.
Yeah.
It was, I could feel it. It was a really intense contraction with it. And then, you know, going through with your head, that's a lot. But then I had her head in my hands. I'm like, oh, like what? Like I did this. And then next thing I know, you know, the next I took a break and they said, take a break. And on the next contraction, she'll come out. And it was effortless. And I held her and I was almost like, and I could think they could tell that I was like, I did it. Like I got to do what I got to do. And the one thing is that Cora had her umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. So the midwife just said, oh, she's got some jewelry on. And so she unwrapped her really fast and then just said, here she is. She just take her back. And so she took her back and put her right on me.
Oh my gosh.
And she didn't make a sound and she was quiet.
Did that worry you?
No.
No.
It was so beautiful and calming because she was looking at me.
And you could see she was okay. And
I
you
could
had
see
her
she was
in your
okay.
arms.
Yeah. And I was holding her and I saw her looking up at me and she wasn't crying. And I thought, wow, she exited this womb world of water and comfort and, you know, really beautiful like darkness that, you know, felt safe. And then she goes into this tub that's warm and very equal to my womb. And then she gets onto my chest. And like, what a beautiful way to enter this world. I love it. I love it. You know, my first baby is an air baby, and she's a Gemini. And my second baby is an Aquarius, a water baby. And her element is still air, but Aquarius, you know, being in the water. And so it's just so beautiful. I thought, I just asked. I said, "Oh, she's really quiet." Yeah, that's really common with water births.
It's very common.
Wow,
it's very common. They're not shocked into the world. It's just a very easy, beautiful transition.
And it's, I think she's felt safe from the moment she's entered the world because of the choice that I made to have a water birth. Because I see that she looks at me almost like sometimes like, am I safe? Like when I entered the world, when something happens, even now being 2.5 months old.
Oh, that same look that she gave you when you held her right after she was born.
Yeah, she'll give me that look. And I'm like, you're safe. And then she's like, and then she just sort of like simmers, you know?
Oh my gosh.
'Cause I see that look in her eyes, like she's asking me, I'm safe, or like, you know, I'm safe, like a statement, or am I safe like I was safe at that moment?
Wow. So the very first moment that you look down at your baby and see her for the very first time, you guys actually started your very first conversation.
Yeah.
That you still utilize today.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
It's incredible. And the thing that I really loved, that I was kind of, I don't know, things like that I learned about after hearing about birthing at the birth center. They're like, well, she'll have the umbilical cord attached to her at the for a while, and you'll just have your placenta that'll sit next to you, like in a bag.
It's wonderful.
And I'm like, this is so cool. Like, this is so great. Babies just they just don't rush you through anything.
They don't take the baby away to do a bunch of, medical stuff. Baby gets to just stay with mom the whole time.
Yep. It was only when I was like, I'm ready for a shower. And then they said, okay, this is a perfect time. Like, do you want to watch us do and I'm like, no, you can do that while I take a shower. My husband will be here.
I love it.
Yeah. And it's just from the choices that I made at the beginning were, dictating and led me down the path to being able to choose the freestanding birth center. But I can't compliment them enough for how they let mamas birth the way that we're meant to birth.
Yes.
Babies.
And not treating labor as if it's broken or it's an emergency just around the corner at any moment. I love I love that beautiful thing that your midwife said. Well, oh, she was born with a little jewelry. What a precious way to just take care of that situation without causing fear or making it a scary thing. Because it's not, actually, and it doesn't need to be either.
Right.
Yeah.
And people even say, I said, oh, well, she was born with her umbilical cord. And people go, oh, what? Oh, my gosh, was she okay? Oh, yeah, she's fine. Like, it wasn't even a thing.
Wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So being able to learn those types of experiences that can happen and have it happen for yourself and say, like, wow, I actually can't wait to be able to tell my girls their birth stories, because they are beautiful, and they're safe, and I was given the tools to be confident, like you've said.
And you were safe. You felt safe.
Yeah. And I would I probably, we don't plan to have more kids, but I would happily birth again because of my experiences.
So it's not a piece that you dread, right?
No.
Like, oh, the pregnancy's great, but I'm dreading the labor.
No, and I would love that for so many mamas. Like, if more and more could be like, hey, labor wasn't so bad. Because you always hear that of, like, the labor, like you said at the beginning in the intro, like the horror, the trauma, the stories of, like, the one or the other. And it's never, people are always kind of shocked when they're like, oh, how was it? I'm like, it was okay. It was okay. Like, I'm okay. One thing I found out, from a postpartum standpoint, actually, is this time having a water birth, my healing process was much, much easier.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think because, like, the vasoconstriction and your blood vessels and everything can relax when you're in a tub. And I didn't have any of that, like, like almost like you're in the air, when you're out in the hospital or something, there's a little bit of that vulnerability that comes with it. Whereas when I was in the tub, I just felt like that was, like, where I needed to be, and it felt one with my body, and everything could relax. And I think that it didn't work against anything.
Right. So
physically, my recovery was just completely different from my first.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Amazing.
And that's even with the fact that you bled a lot on the second. You still are saying, I felt like recovery was way easier.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
way
amazing.
Easier. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was something else that I kind of learned about, like with hemorrhaging or things like those aren't dictated by your first or your second pregnancy either. So you can hemorrhage in your first, but not in your second or your third or fourth or whatever. And so the fact that I went through it the second time, they just were like, hey, bump up your iron, and these are some things that you might want to do in the next couple of days, and
to help your body recover from the blood loss.
Yeah. And at day 5, I was like, I feel great. I feel great.
I love it.
Whereas at like day 20, 25 with my first, I was like, I'm starting to feel better. Oh, like I can go for a walk now, and but things. It was like I never felt like I was throbbing. I always felt kind of throbby with my first. I go for a walk and I just feel like everything heavy.
It's too much. Yeah.
Too much. Yeah. So I was very grateful, very lucky.
I love that you shared these beautiful birth stories with us. And it's important to me just to highlight that there are 2 of them, which means that it wasn't a fluke the first time. It wasn't that you got lucky or, the circumstances, just lined up perfectly and you were able to have this amazing birth. It actually was just that you learned about birth and you knew where you wanted to go and you knew what to expect, and you can do it, and you can do it over and over and over again. It's not like a magical special thing that is unique just to you having this random one-off experience, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
thanks.
I think the whole point is that birth is doable.
Yeah.
We just have to maybe approach it slightly differently than some of us have in the past.
Yeah.
To have something so beautiful. And I love when you talk about it, you don't talk about it from a place of fear. You actually talk about it from a place of like respect and grace, where, you know, it sounds like it was just a beautiful experience for you both times, even though each time there was a slight little twist in the road that you weren't expecting or you didn't plan. It still sounds like they were both very beautiful. And I love the idea of, you know, the fact that you're writing these stories down and you plan to share them with your daughters, because I think that that's going to empower them. And when they're ready to have their babies, the stories that you're able to share with them about their births and the knowledge from within yourself, like within your being, when you share, like, you can do this. Like, what is more powerful than a mom full of confidence telling her daughter, I know you can do this. Like, I know you can do this. You've got it. It's not scary. You have your birth story to read so that you know. Like,
yeah,
you are literally yourself changing the line for the women in your family right now, these births.
Yeah, I hope that. That's what I want them. You know, there was maybe a pause for me of my own birth story. And so being able to say to them that it doesn't have to look like mine, you know, the part that they, you know, oh, Mom, we know our births were blah, blah, blah. Like, they'll hear their birth story every year until they're old. And they'll be like, yeah, Mom, we know the birth story. It'll be, I want you to know this, because if and when you have your own babies, that you feel that safety and you
yes.
feel that it's possible, and that it might not look like, you know, my story, but that you can be empowered.
Right.
And that's those are all the things that I did leading up to it, that I'm just so grateful that there's so much information out there that is informing, mm-hmm. rather than, you know, more detrimental towards the process of what can happen. It's that we're making those strides to it being informative
yes.
and positive, and that's what it should be.
I love that. Before we wrap it up, if you could share one thing with the audience that might be helpful to them, so maybe first-time mama, maybe a second or third-time mama who has some trauma birth stories before this pregnancy, if you could share one thing with them that might be helpful, what would that be?
That's a really good question. I think it's learn a little bit about what makes you scared or fearful, what puts you in a place of vulnerability. Because if you can tap into, okay, if this were to happen, I would be the most scared, or if this happens again, I would be the most scared. And that's when things maybe start to take downward spirals in labor. Or the other thing is having that conversation of, you know, who can support you the best, who is the best person for you in that room to make sure you have the best birth. That's what I would share with a first-time mama or a mama that's looking, you know, for their second time, is really sit with yourself and know where you're the most vulnerable or fearful.
I love that. Because if you can look at that in a safe moment, in a safe space, and kind of look at all the different angles of that fearful thing, you can kind of work through it before you get there, if you ever do get there at all, right?
Right.
I love that. So one of the things that we ask in our childbirth classes, you know, when thinking about labor, what is one thing you hope won't happen? Just like to kind of like, so let's go there. Like,
yeah.
that one thing you hope won't happen, and then what?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Cool.
Oh, Meg,
Thanks,
thank you
Bea.
so much for sharing your story with everyone. And, you know, for the listeners, we really hope that, you know, this shines a new light on what labor and birth can look like, and hopefully it inspires you to do some research and thinking about what yours might be able to look like. It obviously doesn't have to be the same, but just, you know, start thinking about what yours might unfold like, and start taking the steps to hopefully achieve that goal, however that might be for you. This is our first birth story. I'm excited to have more. Miss Meg, thank you so much. For the audience, thank you for being here. Until next time.